Did you know that aligning your mindset, your spirit, and your sales goals together could actually skyrocket your performance? In this episode, we explore the ways for you to get your spirit right for selling. And as a result, have it lead to fulfillment and authenticity in your sales results. Let's grow. I've mentioned before that for many years, in fact, for 2 decades, over 2 decades, I resented the idea that I was a salesperson. When someone would suggest that what I was doing was actually in sales, there was a part of me that, went to I took it personal. In fact, at times, even offended by the idea that what I was doing was actually sales. And when I began to really explore the reason for that or how come, it was because my image of a salesperson was not one that was favorable. And because my image of the profession, my image of a salesperson was not favorable, then obviously I didn't want to see myself as that. Man, was I wrong. I had it absolutely incorrect. It was absolutely incorrect, the way that I was viewing it, though. And so I believe it was Wayne Dyer who said that when you change the way you look at things, then what you look at changes. I'll say that again. When you change the way you look at a thing, then what you're looking at actually changes. And it was because I had to have that shift in mindset or transform how I viewed what I was doing. Was I able to actually start to generate great success while also assisting and really adding value, great value to more people? But definitely I was stuck for a while. In fact, it was viewed, the kind of the rap on me was that, man, mechanically it was flawless, right? Well, I got odds and ums here now, but it was mechanically flawless, dressed to the nines, great presenter, very articulate. We won't go there, right? But those are things that was, those are things that were said. That's how it was described. And yet, when I would finish, very few people would actually take action. And in fact, I loved what I did. And so I practiced. My delivery was great. All of the mechanics were there. Again, it was mechanically flawless. I looked the part, and I loved it. And yet there was no transformation happening. There was nothing on, there was no transformation and very few transactions. So much so that I got benched. So much so that, the organization that I was with at the time was like, man, yeah, you're great. We like you, but no one moves. No one's taking action when you're finished, and we can't have that. And so as a result, I got put on the sideline. I was taken out the game. I was put on the bench. That's what I mean. I was pulled out the game and sat on the bench. And that was a defining moment for me. It was embarrassing. It was humiliating. And I was questioning myself, like, how is it that I can love what I'm doing so much and yet have so poor performance? All right. How can I love what I'm doing so much and yet be so ineffective in what I'm getting people to do? At the end of a presentation or at the end of a course, I would have people say, man, that was great. That was awesome. That was wonderful. You are great. You're awesome. You're entertaining. You're this, you're that. And yet no one would move. And I kept ignoring that idea until I was actually sidelined. And when I got sidelined, I was, it was a defining point. It was a pivotal moment. Either I could change professions or I could get better at what I was doing. And I loved it so much that I was willing to do what was necessary in order for me to get better. And when I looked at that and I closely examined that, I said, well, ultimately, what I've got to do is I've got to have people take action at the end. I've got to find a way to have people see that what I am sharing with them supports them in getting better and supports them in getting closer to the life of their dreams. And that question, as I'm pondering it, I'm like, wait a second. Like, that's it. That's it. That's the and in that moment I started, so it wasn't immediate or instantaneous, but that began the evolution of really understanding what it is to be a salesperson. In my view, my new narrative or frame was that in sales, what you're essentially doing is closing the gap between a person wanting or having a desire and a person having or it being manifest. Okay, so when you're really effective, you move a person closer or you provide them a solution that gets them ultimately what it is that they want. And so in recognizing that, I saw, okay, well, first, I've got to listen better. So it really doesn't matter how mechanically flawless I am. It doesn't matter how great a presenter I am, right? I've got to listen to the needs and the challenges of those that I'm looking to assist, to the lives that I want to add value to. How I listen has to change. And of course, I had read books, I had attended courses on handling objections and, these crafty things to say when someone tells you that they don't have the money or that they don't have the time. But as I began to explore that more deeply, I'm like, yeah, that's child's play, right? That's very sophomoric. Those types of objections, there are many books and courses written about how you handle those objections. But you know what I started to see because of in my own life. In my own life, I could point to times, and I'm sure that you can also, where you can point to times where you didn't have the time and you didn't have the money, and yet you made it happen. Have you not? Think into your life, and are there times when you didn't know where the money was going to come from? You didn't know where the support was going to come from. You didn't know how you were going to do it. All you knew was this has to be, and you found yourself in a place where you would not be denied. Maybe it was something, that involved your children or keeping your business open for another day. Maybe your relationship, things were tough and difficult, and you didn't know how you were going to do it. But there was an image that you had of, man, I am not giving up. I am not quitting. Like, I will figure this out. And what I began to see was that the objections of time and money are only present when the real value has not been created. You get money objections and time objections when the real value or true value has not been established. And when that happens, then you get these, they're real. Okay, I'm not saying that people make it up, but that's what they can see is the why not. But when you do the work of truly assisting them in creating and seeing the value in closing that gap from what they want to what they have, closing that gap and getting closer to what they truly desire, when you do that, okay, and you paint that picture in an effective way, then in my experience, I found that money and time objections tend to subside because what they want more is the dream. So again, child's play, the how to handle objections. Okay, there's a place for that, but in my experience, what most people are ignorant of, particularly as sales professionals, what they're ignorant of is that objection that a client or potential client is giving you is not the real reason that they don't move forward. The real reason that they don't move forward is because there's an internal dialogue, an internal story or frame that they don't see themselves as having or being deserving or worthy of that dream being fulfilled more immediately. So what you're dealing with are not the objections that are on the surface, but the deeper, more ingrained beliefs that they have about themselves, about other people, about life, or about the world that are actually getting in the way. You'll typically find that they have the internal story or the internal objections, and those are beliefs that they have about themselves, what they came from, what they've been through, what they're worthy or deserving of. Those are internal belief structures that if you're not aware that that's what you're actually battling, then you'll spend your time on objections like time and money. And then there are the external. Okay, the external beliefs. So you got the internal beliefs, they have those about themselves. The external belief, and those are beliefs that they have about the world or about other people. And those beliefs, when you don't recognize that that's really what you're up against, is, their belief about the world or how the world is or how they'll be treated if they're successful, how they'll be looked at if they actually start to win in their life. Like, those are beliefs that they have about the world, and they're ingrained, conditioned in, and have been there for a very long time. But if you don't know that that's what you're battling, then you'll be like down a rabbit hole on some, price objection, and they'll continue to shop and find cheaper, whatever the case may be. All right. So there's the internal, there's the external, and then there's the vehicle itself. That's their beliefs about your ability to deliver on the promise. Right, that's the fulfillment side of it, and obviously there are questions that they have about trust, and if whether or not you are one who can be trusted to deliver on what you've promised. Can you fulfill on your bold prediction? Okay, so when you're dealing with a person who is not ready yet to move forward or have been chosen to move forward, you're actually in battle with beliefs that sometimes they're not even conscious of. And so they throw the smokescreen objection out, but really it's the more inherent beliefs that they have about themselves, other people, life, or the world that blocks them from having more of what they want. And so when you start to embrace that idea, then what I have found that works is you identify that place in you that feels or has felt the same. There's a place in you that is also in them where what you both want is the same. There's a place in you that is also in them who has experienced the feelings of those limiting beliefs and diminishing thoughts. And you've got to be willing, you don't got to, but if you're going to be effective and experience more transformational selling and not transactional relationship, you've got to be willing to go there yourself, connect with it, so that your client can also feel and experience that as well. Very, very important. So if you're not aware enough to know that you can connect to those feelings of less than, and, I'm not worthy, or, I've got to get more information, I've got to study more, I've got to be, I've got to qualify myself more in order to have this outcome, then all of that is an energy block between you and your prospective client. I oftentimes will share the story of growing up in Southeast Oklahoma on the west side of the tracks and looking across those tracks and seeing that it seemed that everything was, more positive and the good stuff was happening over there. And, that's where school was and the golf course was and, the grocery store and the retail shops and, all of those things. In order to experience that, McDonald's was there also, but in order to experience that, we had to go across the tracks. And so to a little kid growing up, it felt like, man, all of the good things that are happening on the other side. I want to know how it is that we can change lines, because growing up, it felt like there are the haves and the have-nots, and I was in the have-not line. I wanted to know, how do you change lines? Now, I share that story, and oftentimes when I share that story, I may be in an audience where I'm the only person, I'm the only black person there. Okay. So I could share that story of growing up on the side of the tracks and growing up under the poverty line. And I could be speaking to an audience of people who, like, that was not their life experience growing up. But I can still share the story. Why? Because, and then I'll often say, now, maybe you don't know what it's like to be the only person, of your skin color or your ethnicity. You may not know what it's like to have ever been in those environments, but have you ever felt like you were in a room where you didn't belong? Have you ever wondered whether or not you were good enough? Is there any part of you, any experience where you've ever doubted whether or not you had what it takes? So I can take my story, and even though it's not one that they necessarily have had specifically, but because my story produced limiting beliefs about myself, about other people, about life, and how the world works, I can now translate that to experiences where I am certain that they've had those feelings of limiting beliefs and self-doubt. And so now, as a result of that, we can connect there on that belief, even though the experience was not the same. And then once you're connected there, now you start to move people a bit closer to having or saying yes to your solution. And if you don't see your solution as one that solves problems, as one that gets people closer to the life of their dreams or having what it is that they want, then perhaps look at something else, okay? Something else to represent, something else to align. If you're not in a person's life to assist them in being better, then for what reason Are you there? So it required a different level of listening and listening for something else, not the surface level, great, elementary level objections, but what are the beliefs? What's the story that they have in their mind that is keeping them from saying yes to doing whatever's necessary to have what they want right now? And then I start to note, okay, well, we do that. And then you want to highlight, okay, a person's resourcefulness rather than their resources. Resourcefulness, like which would you rather have? The resourcefulness or the resources? Would you rather have would you rather have the resources or the resourcefulness? Now, it's not a trick question, but inevitably, you can't have all resources that will ever be needed. Inevitably, there will be times when you've got to figure out, how do we get this done? How am I going to make this happen? And so if you're a person who has always had things handed to you, if you're an individual who's never had to sweat, right, there's a reason why we tend to like the stories of those who have had to go and make it happen, because we get to experience through their stories, through their inspiration, we get to experience what it's like to have to go through something in order to make it happen, right? And through that, we develop the resilience that's necessary in order for us to be resourceful. I believe that if you start to see yourself as a resourceful person, now you can move with great courage and confidence, because you know that no matter what comes up, you can handle it. If you've had yourself tested enough to build up the resilience, then now you're not afraid of what may come up. And actually, that will allow you to celebrate your achievements and accomplishments even more. I snuck that in again this week, did I not? Okay. Because high achievers, some of the worst at celebrating and acknowledging themselves. But here's the thing. If you know that you're resourceful, then you're not so attached to your current resources. Because we all know and have had experiences where we can be up or down in our current level of resources that I can tap into. But your resourcefulness, your resilient mind, is always yours. And you have the ability and the capacity to figure it out. So first, you're listening for what's really in the way. And it's not those top level like objections, but what's the belief that's in the way that you can also connect to. And once that's felt and experienced, there's an energy that exists between you and that client. And when they know that you can feel, and you do feel where they are, now you can be trusted to move forward. And as you begin to do that, then it's like, okay, yes, there's going to be a cost to it, but that's how transformation works, right? We don't get to experience transformation without being willing to pay some price. That's not a Courtland rule, right? That is a life rule, right? There's a price that must be paid. And so rather than be worried about what those prices will be and if whether or not like you can, afford it, just know that you are resourceful. Look at those times, connect with those times in your life when you had to make it happen without knowing what your solution was going to be. Those resourceful moments built through resilience, built through tests, built through up-leveling yourself enough to transform. That's where that in my view is where champions are made. You want to be resourceful more than have ready resources. Now, having some resources is good, but you'll be able to enjoy your success more as long as you know that no matter what happens, you can handle it. You'll be able to bring it back. And then number 3, I say this way. It's about recognizing that that selling is a spiritual practice. As I said a moment ago, there's a place in you that is also in me where what we both want is the same. Ultimately, what you're doing when you sell to another person is you're ultimately selling to yourself. Find that place in you that is also in them where what you want is the same. And then don't sell it, if you wouldn't buy it. The number of people who attempt to sell things that they've never tested, they look to sell things that they've never tried. Those individuals I'm mind boggled, okay? Because ultimately, what you're like, if you've never purchased it, if you've never paid that price for a thing, then how can there be internal alignment such that you are able to convince someone else that this is the route? And regardless of slick verbiage, okay, that's an energy that is felt. And so in my view, it's simple as this. If you haven't, I will only teach what I've tested. So if I know that you and I are connected, that you and I are one, if I recognize that, okay, if I recognize that, then I won't look to deliver to you anything that I wouldn't deliver or purchase for myself. That makes it spiritual, because I recognize that I can't cheat you without cheating me. I can't take from you without taking from me. It is also true that I cannot give to you without giving to myself. I hope that helps. If it does, don't keep it a secret. Let someone know that this podcast does exist. And here we at Unmuted, we explore ways to go from mindset to marketplace. How do you take the growth mindset and convert it to a business that not only inspires others, but makes you proud of yourself? I'm Courtland, and we'll see you at the next episode.